Before dawn, the Pacific turned violent. Far offshore, a swirl of clouds gathered speed, silent, invisible, unstoppable. By the time the sun should have risen over Mexico's west coast, the storm already had a name: Priscilla. Within hours, paradise was gone. In Puerto Vallarta, a city known for sunshine beaches and American tourists' waves rose 12 to 15 feet high, hammering the coast with winds topping 120 miles per hour. The ocean tore through the famous Malecón boardwalk, shattering concrete and flooding the streets where families had walked the night before. Power lines snapped. Storefronts imploded. The city went dark, one of Mexico's most beautiful places, swallowed by the sea. And as Hurricane Priscilla roared north toward Baja California Sur, it left behind more than destruction. It left behind a question that no one could ignore. How does paradise drown in a single night? The day began like any other on Mexico's Pacific coast. Fishermen launched their boats before dawn, tourists filled hotel balconies with coffee in hand, and the sun glowed faintly over the bay. But behind the horizon, the Pacific was changing. Just 40 miles offshore, warm waters had turned a tropical disturbance into a powerful engine of wind and rain. The National Hurricane Center began tracking it at first light, sustained winds at 115 miles per hour, gusts climbing past 120 miles per hour. Within hours, the storm had a name: Hurricane Priscilla, and Puerto Vallarta was directly in its path. At 8 a.m., the first bands of rain swept across the coastline. Palm trees bent until their crowns brushed the pavement. Street vendors packed up their stalls, their voices drowned beneath the rising howl of wind. By mid-morning, the sea was no longer a line on the horizon, it was everywhere. Waves 12 to 15 feet high crashed against the city's famous Malecón boardwalk, tearing chunks of concrete free and hurling them into the streets. The sound was a deep rolling thunder that never stopped. Francisco Medina Asensio Avenue, the city's main artery, disappeared under 3 feet of brown water. Cars bobbed like toys. Storefront windows shattered under flying debris. Neon signs sparked and died. From the air, Puerto Vallarta looked like it had been erased. Streets had become rivers. Beaches had vanished. The boundary between land and ocean no longer existed. And then, just after 2 p.m., the rain intensified again. Priscilla's eye wall brushed the coast, hammering the city with 6 inches of rainfall in less than 8 hours. Wind gusts topped 125 minutes, ripping roofs from houses and tossing palm trunks across parking lots. As night began to fall, the city that had drawn millions of visitors each year was unrecognizable, its skyline a silhouette of broken windows and flashing emergency lights. Puerto Vallarta, the jewel of Mexico's Pacific Riviera, had become a city underwater. And Hurricane Priscilla was only getting stronger.
Oh, ma'am, eso es hielo. Eso es hielo. Se nos está inundando la casa. No.
By early afternoon, Puerto Vallarta was no longer a city, it was a struggle. The wind didn't blow anymore. It screamed, ripping through the streets with the force of a freight train. Rain no longer fell. It attacked, slicing sideways through the air, drenching everything in seconds. The Malecón boardwalk, once filled with tourists and street performers, was buried beneath waves that crashed over the seawall. 12-foot swells pounded the concrete, collapsing entire sections of the walkway and dragging debris back into the sea. What had been a postcard-perfect view was now a churning gray nightmare. At the city's core, Francisco Medina Asensio Avenue, the main thoroughfare, had disappeared beneath 3 feet of water. Cars floated sideways, pushed by a current so strong it carried trash cans, furniture, and pieces of roofing through intersections. Traffic lights blinked uselessly in the wind, red, yellow, green, as if the storm were mocking the idea of control. Inside the Transit Control Center, Deputy Director Katia Vargas watched the city's security cameras flicker and die one by one. Across town, firefighters and police worked in waist-deep floodwater, helping families climb from submerged homes. In some neighborhoods, the water was so high that people escaped through second-story windows carrying children on their shoulders. In the downtown district, small business owners stood guard over their shops, watching helplessly as floodwater crept higher. Neon lights flickered under the surface, glowing, fading, dying. By 4 p.m., sustained winds reached 115 miles per hour with gusts near 120 mph. Debris flew through the air like shrapnel. Roof tiles slammed into walls. Palm trees snapped in half. The once colorful beaches of Puerto Vallarta were now a wasteland littered with wreckage, uprooted palms, and fishing boats torn from their moorings. The ocean had taken back what was once its own. From above, helicopters filmed what looked less like a resort city and more like a war zone. And yet, amid the destruction, flashes of humanity persisted: a rescue crew carrying an elderly couple through knee-deep water, a firefighter shielding a dog under a tarp, a hotel employee holding hands with frightened tourists in the dark. As night approached, the rain showed no sign of stopping. The city's power grid was crippled. Its communication lines cut its streets impassable. Puerto Vallarta, Mexico's paradise of sunshine and sea breeze, had become an island of fear, and the worst was still to come. As darkness fell, the storm showed no mercy, and neither did the people fighting it. In the flooded streets of Puerto Vallarta, the power was gone, the air heavy with salt and gasoline. The only light came from flashlights bobbing through the rain, the rescue teams. In one neighborhood near the airport, rescuers used inflatable rafts to reach an elderly couple trapped on the second floor of their home. Across town, Civil Protection and the Mexican Navy coordinated dozens of emergency calls. Roads were impassable. Bridges had collapsed. Teams carried first aid kits and life jackets, moving through side streets now turned into rivers. By 10 p.m., nearly half the city was without power. Cell service collapsed. The only connection left was the radio, a lifeline crackling through static, repeating the same words: "Stay calm. Stay inside. Help is coming." In Los Cabos, over 240 people took shelter as torrential rain and mudslides swept across Baja California Sur. Schools and public transport were suspended. Along the Trans-Peninsular Highway, landslides cut off entire communities, leaving dozens stranded. By midnight, the federal response was in full motion. President Claudia Sheinbaum activated the National Emergency Plan, deploying the Army, Navy, and National Guard. Convoys carrying food pumps and rescue gear rolled through flooded highways under sheets of rain. Soldiers formed human chains to reach stranded families. Helicopters circled overhead, lowering ropes to rooftops where people waved flashlights in the dark. Inside the shelters, fear mixed with gratitude. A child shared her cookies with a rescue worker. A teacher read stories by candlelight to calm the younger ones. The storm outside howled, but inside those walls, people held on to one another, refusing to let go. "We've learned to survive together," said a volunteer. "Even when the sea takes everything, it can't take that." By dawn, the wind had eased, not because the storm was gone, but because it had moved north. Puerto Vallarta, bruised and broken, was still standing. And for the thousands who made it through the night, that was enough. As the first light of morning touched Puerto Vallarta, the storm had already moved on, but its fury had not. Hurricane Priscilla was now crawling northwest, skirting the coastline of Baja California Sur, spreading bands of heavy rain hundreds of miles wide. What had started as a coastal disaster was becoming a national emergency. In Los Cabos, the rain arrived before sunrise. The streets filled in minutes. Runoff from the mountains surged through the city like brown rivers carrying debris and entire trees downhill. The roar of water echoed through empty hotels. By mid-morning, the Trans-Peninsular Highway, a critical lifeline connecting the peninsula, was cut off in multiple locations. Landslides buried lanes beneath tons of rock and mud, leaving trucks stranded for miles. Authorities ordered an immediate suspension of schools, government offices, and public transportation. In La Paz, the state capital civil protection teams patrolled rising streams and low-lying bridges. Sirens echoed through neighborhoods. Avoid driving. Stay indoors, officials warned over loudspeakers. By the afternoon, wind speeds hit 95 km/h, with gusts nearing 120 miles offshore. The National Water Commission Conagua predicted up to 6 inches of rainfall across Baja California Sur over the next 48 hours, more than the region normally sees in 2 months. But the danger didn't stop there. As Priscilla moved inland, its massive cloud shield collided with another tropical system, Tropical Storm Raymond, forming a chain of moisture that stretched deep into central Mexico. In Veracruz, rivers burst their banks, swallowing highways and farmlands. Puebla, Querétaro, Guerrero, and San Luis Potosí all reported flash floods and landslides. A police officer in Veracruz was killed during a rescue attempt when a hillside gave way. More than 312 homes were damaged and over 5,000 residents displaced across 38 municipalities. In Jalpan de Serra, a small mountain town, a dam overflowed after hours of relentless rain. 20 families evacuated in the dark, leaving behind everything they owned. Across the Central Highlands, rock slides crushed highways, bridges collapsed, and power lines snapped. Schools were closed in multiple states. Flights were delayed, airports flooded, and entire towns left in isolation. In less than 5 days, Priscilla had crossed from the Pacific to the interior, leaving a trail of devastation nearly 900 miles long. Mexico, a country of deserts, jungles, and coastlines, was united under one thing: the sound of falling rain. When the rain finally stopped, silence took its place, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that comes after something breaks. Across Mexico's Pacific coast, the storm had moved on, but what it left behind didn't look like home anymore. In Puerto Vallarta, the ocean had retreated, revealing streets coated in thick mud and broken glass. Palm trunks lay twisted along the shoreline like driftwood. In Los Cabos, the story was the same. Entire neighborhoods were still without power. Rural communities cut off by landslides waited for rescue convoys bringing clean water and food. The ports were closed. Fishing boats, their nets tangled and masts broken, lay scattered across the sand. The local economy, tourism, fishing, small trade had come to a standstill. But even as the losses piled up, so did the signs of resilience. By week's end, hundreds of homes were still damaged, thousands remained without power, and the cost of rebuilding climbed into the millions of dollars. But for those who survived, it wasn't about money. It was about memory and the will to start again. Along the waterfront, the iconic Puerto Vallarta letters still stood, chipped, faded, but standing. Children splashed in shallow puddles nearby as the clouds parted and the sun broke through for the first time in days. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The storm has passed, but its message still echoes. What happened in Mexico wasn't just about wind and rain. It was about people, their courage, their loss, their fight to rebuild what nature took away. And now, the question isn't whether another storm will come. It's how ready we'll be when it does. Do you believe disasters like this are unstoppable acts of nature, or the result of human impact on our planet? Are we truly prepared for what's coming, or are we still hoping it'll never reach us? Tell us what you think in the comments below. Your stories, your thoughts, your voice, they matter. Because awareness begins with conversation. And conversation leads to change. If this story moved you, if it made you stop, think, or feel, don't let it end here. Hit like to help more people see the truth behind the headlines. Share this video with someone who needs to understand what's happening around us. Subscribe for more real stories of survival resilience and the changing world we all share. Because every storm leaves behind more than destruction. It leaves behind a warning. And somewhere out there beyond the horizon, the next storm is already forming.